The baseball season winding down. Craig Calcaterra, NBC Sports Radio, the 24/7 live sports talk radio network, which you can listen to at NBCSportsRadio.com. Download the NBC Sports Radio mobile app today. Craig, we've got less than 2 weeks to go in the baseball season, and these playoff races are really interesting. And, in the National League, we're looking at a possible three-way tie. I mean, coming down the stretch, Mets, Cardinals, Giants. If you haven't been paying attention, this is something to behold right here.
Yeah, it's sort of an exercise in futility really, because they're all playing kind of bad. Mets, Cardinals, and Giants. Giants' second half has been terrible. The Mets just got swept by the Braves of all teams, and the Cardinals had a nice little winning streak there, but got pounded by the Rockies yesterday. They're 500 in their last 8 games. I don't know if anybody really wants it, but, those of us who don't root for those 3 teams, we have to be rooting for a three-way tie because that's pure chaos.
What happens in that situation? I mean, this is kind of unprecedented. What do they do?
They travel a lot. That's what's going to happen. If they all finish at the same record, the season ends a week from Sunday. On Monday, 2 of those teams would play. The winner would then go on, or the loser would then have to go to a third team on Tuesday and play them. And you'd end up with 2 teams out of that weird round-robin thing. But it's a pretty complicated thing that has to deal with head-to-head records and intra-division records. And the upshot is whoever comes out of that wild card tie would end up playing in like 3 cities in 4 days or something.
So they do have actual rules in place for the three-way tie should that come. Because right now, as we sit here during this conversation, Craig, New York 80-72, St. Louis 80-72, San Francisco 80-72. So the rules are there, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. MLB they have separate rules for 2-way ties, 3-way ties.
Wow.
I've got a post over at NBCSports.com today that sets it out step by step. They have designated Team A, Team B, and Team C. Tells you what city and where they go. All I know is they got to do it in 2 days because that's you really only have one off day after the last day of the season. And then the wild card game starts.
Right. The dates have really been set for a while here, for even all the way down to the final day of the World Series, which goes into November this year. So you look at a situation where, boy, 1 day off for this whole thing could really change a lot of things. So of those 3 teams, who wants it? Who wants it more?
Right now, it doesn't look like anybody does. I still think the Mets look pretty good. I mean, the Mets are probably a better, more complete team at the moment, despite all of their injuries.
They got some major injuries to that.
That's good.
They got some major injuries to that pitching staff.
Yeah, I mean, they lost DeGrom. Harvey's obviously been gone forever. Steven Matt's coming back. That could be a good thing for them. Obviously, Bartolo Colon is indestructible. But, the fact that they're even in the playoff conversation, given all the injuries, not just to the pitching staff, but Lucas Duda and everybody else they've lost this year, that says a lot about, one, about how futile the National League is beyond the top couple of teams, but it also says a lot about how they have been resilient this year.
Yeah, if you look at it, Washington leads by 9, Chicago's up 17, and the Dodgers up 6. Those races are virtually over. In fact, they are all over, except for maybe a giant miracle there in the West. But you look at a situation with these wild cards, it is going to potentially come down to the final day here. And then you go up into the American League here, where the Red Sox have a 5-game lead, Cleveland's up 7.5, Texas 8.5. But that wild card race, a little bit more interesting. How do you kind of handicap the American League wild card race here?
Well, it's interesting because right now the Blue Jays and the Orioles would be the wild card teams if it ended right now. But they're very close. The Tigers and the Astros are only 1 game behind the Orioles. And the interesting thing here is Blue Jays, Orioles, and the Red Sox, they play each other a lot still in the last week and a half of the season. Tigers have a fairly easy schedule. The Astros are done playing the Rangers. They've got a fairly easy schedule. It wouldn't be shocking at all to see both of the non-AL East teams, or both of the AL East teams, to fall back just because of attrition and watch Detroit and Houston sort of waltz in there. I think there's really no predicting what's going to happen there.
Really good baseball here down the final 8 or 9 days of the baseball season here, as these wild cards really heat up, and the divisions. I guess these wild cards are really serve their purpose, Craig, because the divisions are so. It seems like seemingly every single one of them is over.
Yeah, and this is, to be cynical, part of the reason why Major League Baseball started the wild card 20 years ago, and why they started the second wild card a few years back. They've just, note, if you look at attendance, if you look at TV ratings, if you look at everything, the minute fans just decide that their team is out of it being defined as meaningful games of any sort, they just sort of look away and they watch football or something else. And by keeping teams even alive for a one-game playoff, which is what the wild card really is, there's still interest. It's really had a financial effect and an impact and just a general interest impact on what's going on, even if it's not competing for the best of the best.
Yeah, magic numbers, Nationals 2, Rangers 2, Indians 5, Dodgers 5, Red Sox 6. All right, as we are down the final, 10 days of the baseball season here, you mentioned Sunday, a week from Sunday is the final day of the baseball season. Rangers, best record in baseball, and maybe baseball history when it comes to one-run games. Is that enough for you right now to think that the Rangers are the favorite to win this whole thing?
I don't put a lot of predictive stock in the one-run game thing. I don't want to use the word luck because I know baseball fans hate the word luck, but there is a lot of luck to that. I mean, one run in a game can score any number of ways. I think that, there's something to be said for the way Bannister has managed that bullpen. There's something to be said just for the strength of the bullpen overall and the depth of that team. But I don't think you can depend on one-run games to catapult you forward. If you remember, there were a couple of years, 2010, 2011, the Baltimore Orioles had a very similar profile. They were winning every one-run game. Their bullpen was fantastic. They didn't go far in the playoffs, and it's really not anything that can tell you what's going to happen in the future, even if it tells you how lucky they've been in the past.
Talking with Craig Calcaterra, NBC Sports, Major League Baseball, and bring it close to home real fast as the Phillies are kind of playing out the stretch here. We had talked all season about how they played well. They kind of played over their heads. Pete Mackinnon had done a really nice job. And then since the All-Star break, they really had some hard times. But as we move forward here, what is kind of the vibe you're getting about where this team is heading towards, this offseason with what they've kind of, a lot of injuries to the pitching staff down the stretch here, which has kind of put them right around the win total that everybody kind of had thought, even though they had a lot of one-run wins, which kind of goes to what your narrative is, how lucky that could be. But what is kind of the vibe around them as they play out the stretch here?
I think a generally positive one. The second half, and especially the last month or so, seeing some power from some sources that you wouldn't expect it from has been something to build on. Seeing that Tommy Joseph can probably handle that first base job against both righties and lefties is not bad. Is he fantastic? No, but he could be serviceable for a rebuilding team. It's interesting the power that is sort of emerged there. From a couple of them, especially like Freddie Galvis, has been good to see. I think it's just a standard rebuild, and not a bad job of it. Not anything nearly as bad as a lot of people expected back in March.
Yeah, even though the win total not quite much different from a year ago, but a lot of people thinking that they're at least moving in the right direction. And Craig, they're going to be a factor, I guess, in this wild card race. They faced the Mets starting tonight 6 more times.
Yeah, I know, right? And that had to make Mets fans look pretty optimistic or feel pretty optimistic when they saw 3 games against the Braves, 6 games against the Phillies. Well, that didn't go too well against the Braves. They just got swept. So that's the beautiful part about baseball. All that schedule talk that people like in college football and the NFL doesn't really hold water. You got to beat everybody.
Well, and the Cardinals, they faced the Cubs 3 times. I'm sure the Cubs would love nothing more to knock out their buddies, the Cardinals. They play the Reds and Pirates 7 times. They got the Mets. The Mets play the Phillies for 4, the Marlins for 3, the Phillies for 3 to close it out. And then the Giants will play the Dodgers for 3 to finish out the season. They got the Padres and the Rockies in there. So that National League 3-teamer that we started this conversation off, really going to be interesting. I do want to get your take on David Ortiz and the way he is finishing this year. His 36th home run of the season the other night, passed Dave Kingman for the most in a player's final season. Are we sure this is it, right? He's done.
Absolutely. He has said every single time he's been asked about it that he is done. His feet are barking. He's been amazed himself that he's gotten this much production out. He's going out on top, and I think that whole go out on top with maybe an MVP season is going to be the thing that sort of clinches the Hall of Fame for him, even though he's a DH and even though he had some PED stuff happen several years back.
Craig, last one, if we look at inside the NL East here, we talked about the Mets, we talked about the Phillies, got the Nationals. You have really run away with the division without Bryce Harper having a great year there. The Marlins, they were in it for a while. They're at 500 right now. But the Braves, who have won 5 straight, have they found their manager?
There's a chance. Brian Snitker was supposed to just be the interim guy. He's a company man who's been there for almost 40 years. He said yesterday that he'd be interested in the job next year, and the front office said that they might strongly consider him. Not the most exciting choice, but then again, he's done a lot with not very much, and in the second half especially. They're a 500 team in the last 2 months. No one would have expected that from the Braves.
He's kind of the Pete Mackinnon, right? Kind of that choice where it's like, hey, the guys like him. He's
Absolutely.
safe. They like him. Let's just stick with him because we're not going to win next year anyway. Is that kind of the thought?
I think that's the thought. They like stability there, and he's been with the organization forever.
Craig Calcaterra, NBC Sports Radio, the 24/7 live sports talk network, which you can listen to at NBCSportsRadio.com. Download the NBC Sports Radio mobile app today. The baseball playoffs. Watch that 3-team race in the National League. Very exciting. Thanks, Craig.
Cool. Thanks for having me.